Hey guys, this is Jake, Scrapping with Jesus. Today's video is going to be kind of hard. It's long overdue. A lot of people were wondering about my illness, my liver disease, and about my liver transplant. I've never really told this story. It's hard. All I do is cry, and I just wanna look forward, not backwards. But so if I can help anybody through this video, then it would be worth it. As I tell the story, I'm going to sit here and work and fiddle. A lot of my stories are from memories shared from my wife through my photos that I have, and a lot of it's from what I lived through. You might find me going back and forth on stories, but I'll try to stay on track. My story begins on October 31st of 2023. I believe that I was sick longer than that. It started out with just stomach pains. I went to the doctor that I was seeing at the time, and she always blamed IBS. My pain was all through my IBS. After living through a year of just constant pain, my father found me another doctor, and I went to see her. Out of all the doctors, I will say she sat there and listened to my story, listened to my pains, and promised me we'd get to the better, get down and find out what was wrong. So after all the blood work had came back, my platelets were almost non-existent. I want you guys to understand how Jesus has been in my life since that day. My doctor has a friend who's a hematologist. She had a friend who's a rheumatoidologist. Their waiting list was up to a year long. I believe this was towards the end of COVID, so they had an extremely long waiting list to get people in. After seeing my platelets, my doctor called in her favors. I was seen that week with both doctors. I was at the hematologist, the rheumatoidologist, just about every specialist that I could go in, and I was immediately seen. Sometimes that's unheard of, and I believe that God had a part in that and get me seen quickly. At first, I believe they thought maybe I had cancer, and that was my biggest fear. Because a hepatologist, in my eyes, I thought was a blood doctor for cancer. I don't know, but I was scared. They eventually sent me to the hospital. They had their suspicions of what might have been going on, and my liver levels were kind of wonky. So they went and sent me to get a liver biopsy. Came back that my liver was in bad shape. So, I mean, for the years prior, my one doctor kept blaming it on IBS. And all she had to do was sit down, listen to me, and draw blood. But she never did that. So after my liver biopsy, we had an idea, okay, I didn't ever think about a transplant. I didn't think of anything. I thought it could be healed. I thought everything was, give me medicine and be good to go. So as I said, October 31st of 2023, that's where my adventure begins. That time that I was complaining about my belly hurting, the toxins were building in my brain. So I say October 31st, but honestly it was in November. But in my brain, the last day I remember was October 31st. We came home that night. I was tired. And I laid down pretty early. And for some reason I woke up and heard my wife talking to my daughter. So I got up, walked into the living room, and fell. I fell and immediately stood back up, and I fell again. At that point, all I kept saying is my wheel wasn't working. My wheel was not working. The toxins were in my brain so bad that I thought I was on one of them cartoons where the robots had a wheel for its legs. And my wheel wouldn't work, and that's why I was falling. My wife and daughter rushed me to the hospital, and it was found out that it had progressed pretty bad. They kept me in there for about 3 or 4 days, got me feeling better, and sent me home. And then sometime in December, I really don't know the day, my wife and son had to rush me back up to the hospital, and all I remember, my son carrying me into the ER room, sat me down on a wheelchair. And like every place in the USA, when the ER's full, wait in the waiting room. I fell out of my wheelchair and blacked out. And that's all I remember. So, what's going to happen next is I'm going to tell you the stories that my wife has instructed me, told me about. I was really sick. Christmas Eve of 2023, the doctors had given up on me. My liver was failing, my kidneys were failing, my heart was getting erratic. I forget the name, if it was tachycardia or what it was called, but they didn't believe I'd make it overnight. They had my wife get the family together to see me before I would die. I woke up the next morning. Let me back up. I remember that night, I remember hearing my wife's voice ask me if I'm in here. Kept saying, "Are you in there? Are you in there?" I don't know how many times she's asked me that. Am I in there? But I do remember being able to get my strength up, and I told her, "I'm here." I woke up the next morning to the shock of all the doctors in Memorial. My kidneys came back. They were hurt. They were damaged. But I came back immediately through a friend of ours who has been steadfastly advocating for me, was explaining to my wife what needs to be done. My friend Stacy, who's a flight nurse, who had friends at the hospital, she told my wife who she needs to talk to, where I needed to go, and how to get about doing it. A couple of days after Christmas, I remember thinking they're transferring me to Indy. My wife advocated very hard, need to go to Indy, and I just remember I was going to go on a helicopter ride. Well, we ended up having a blizzard that night. Had to take an ambulance. Got down to Indy. I was in isolation. Come to find out from Memorial, I caught COVID and I had pneumonia and I had something else. I don't remember. Everything that should have took a man who was as weak as I was should have taken me down. I will say that it felt like years that I was in that hospital. In reality, it was only a couple weeks, but to me it was years. They got me stable, got it to where I could walk. Then they sent me home. My belly constantly hurt, and it was found that I was having ascites, fluid in my belly, so I had to go and have stomach drains. Started out taking 14 liters of fluid out of my body each week. But because my kidneys were damaged, I had to go in twice a week, and they would do 8 and 8 maximum. It was at that time that I got saved. I think I was saved at the end of December. And in January, I was too weak to go to the church. And my mom, who went to school for ministry and all that, was given permission through my pastor that she could baptize me. And so in January, and I don't remember the date, but I was baptized. You know you're sick when you look forward to going to the hospital. Each week I needed to go to the hospital. I had to be with my friends. They understood what I was going through. They were my friends. I needed my stomach pumped. I can't wait to go see my friends. For those of you who have never had ascites or never had a stomach drain, it's not fun and it hurts. But I was so sick, I looked forward to them because I was going to be with my friends who were going to take care of me. If that makes sense. I was getting them done weekly. I was getting sicker and sicker. My liver was barely holding on. I kept getting hospitalized. Finally, I was, my time period is kind of off. I was hospitalized multiple times after that. But sometime in that period, I was tested to see if I could get a liver transplant, if I could be listed on the transplant list. So I had to go through hell trying to get certified for that. They had to teach me to walk. I had to pass all these heart tests, kidney tests, physical test. I had to walk. I had to be able to stand up with no hands and just basically get up off the chair on my own. There was no way that was happening. I failed my test on my physical test. I failed it. I came close, but I did fail it. But with the advocate of my wife, the lady agreed that she was going to pass me as long as we promised I would go to physical therapy and get stronger. So I was listed on the transplant list. Sometime in January, I was listed. Kept getting my stomach drained weekly. Had to go see my friends. I think it was March of that year that they suggested I receive a TIPS procedure. TIPS is an acronym. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not even going to say what it stands for. Basically, they would reroute some of your plumbing in your liver to kind of bypass your liver to get the buildup of fluid so that you could pee it out. And this way your belly wouldn't fill with fluids. Out of 17 doctors who denied me, they wouldn't touch me because I was dying. But I had one doctor. His name was Dr. Johnson. He told me, he says, Jake, the odds aren't good of you surviving this. He says, you're dying right now. You probably won't make a transplant, because I was falling hard. He says, you have a pretty good chance of dying on the operating table. He says, but I'm willing to take it if you are. I thought he was an asshole. He was blunt, but he was honest. And I survived the operation. It was at that time that TIPS procedure prolonged my life. That gentleman, he was brave enough to take the chance on me, knowing that if I had passed, his record would have had a patient that didn't survive a surgery, and he was 100%, and he was scared of it, but he was willing to take that chance. That man saved my life. I got the TIPS procedure, and when I went home, I felt like a new person. I was able to go back to work for a little bit. Started feeling real better. I didn't have to get my stomach drained a lot. Learning how to walk again, getting stronger, all that good stuff because of the courage of that doctor. So while all this is going on, imagine everything's going on. I don't know anything. My mind is void. During that time, my son had tried to be my living donor because a living donor was going to be my best option of survival due to the fact that a liver is one of the most hardest organs to procure for a transplant. You have to match up perfectly and all that. Well, my son had signed up to become my living donor. In the state of Indiana, you can have no more than 10% fatty tissue on your liver in order to become a living donor. And my son had 11%, so I was told no, wouldn't work out. Boy, my son, loved him for thinking about me like that. So while all this is going around, my wife Shauna had signed up to be a donor. I had no knowledge of it. Had I known, I wouldn't have let her. The kids were already losing a father. I didn't want the chance of them losing a mother. But she was very persistent. She got the call because of her blood type. She got the call that if she wanted to move forward for testing, that she could. And she did come to me asking if I would be okay with it. Understand, my wife does not like doctors. The only doctors she's really seen was when she had children, the baby doctors. Other than that, she does not see doctors. So I said, you know what? Let's try it. In my mind, I was like, this is going to be a free doctor visit for her. They're going to check her blood. They're going to check everything for her. I was going to outsmart her. And, yeah, hon, go get your testing. Once again, I was in the hospital, so she was there, and she did her testing. A month or so later, we got the call that she was a match. They don't know how. The odds of a husband and wife matching is less than 0.5%. So with a living donor, unlike a deceased donor, where you get a call and say you got to come in, you schedule a surgery date. So we was like the first one available, we'll take it. August 24th, I received my liver from my wife. She gave me 60%. She came out fantastic. 2 days later, she's up and discharged from the hospital. They couldn't believe how quickly that she recovered. Me, on the other hand, I think a normal transplant surgery is between 12 and 16 hours, I think. Mine was 3 days. Now, I'm sure they had my liver in and connected, that first time. But I had to have 3 different surgeries. I was in respiratory distress. I was in shock. And I was bleeding. And I had so many transfusions. Basically, according to my reports, they had to perform CPR to bring me back. I had a DNR in place, but my wife had told them if there was a chance of me coming back, she wanted me to be able to come back as long as I wasn't a vegetable. I'm glad they listened to her, because here I am today. Anyway, I went from the time I was sick, I was 257 pounds. I dropped down to 152, 153, somewhere in there. So I lost over 100 pounds in 3 months throughout my sickness. After my transplant, I had to go to rehab for a couple weeks because I couldn't walk. I couldn't wipe. I couldn't eat. I was an invalid, basically, just someone laying on the bed talking. But that rehab, they didn't care. They had my butt up and walking, and I really thought it was worse than boot camp when I joined the service. But man, I'm glad they didn't give up on me. They worked hard. So it was found out that my autoimmune disease, unlike if someone was an alcoholic and their liver just dies, you get a new liver and just sew you up and put everything together. My autoimmune disease took out all my arteries, all my veins, everything collapsed. I ended up having to have a portal stain put in permanently in my portal valve. I have been having surgeries afterwards. I have one in December coming up. This will be my 11th one. Taking out these temporary stents and placing, hopefully keeping them out, but if my veins collapse, I'll have to put bigger ones in. And then every 3 months I've been having to go through this. Now, I talked about Jesus and the Lord and how He worked to get me into them doctors within the same week. We get home in recovery and the question is always, why me? Why me, Lord? We grew up with alcoholics in our life. We know a lot of people who are alcoholics. Perfectly healthy. They're choosing to harm themselves. Why me? At my year's checkup after my transplant, it was found through pathology that I had cancer in my liver. It's part of the reason why it took 3 days. The doctors, when they took it out, had seen a spot on my liver that they couldn't say was cancer. but it was suspicious, so they kept going into my body, draining fluids, soaking up anything that could have spilled out of my old liver, and in hopes that nothing would happen. But we found out on my year visit that I had cancer. Jesus chose the lesser of all evils, knowing that I could survive a liver transplant, but I probably would not have survived cancer. And I praise Jesus every day, thanking Him for the second chance I have. So, I'm scrapping for Jesus. Throughout my entire sickness, my church, Huntley Baptist, here in Niles, Michigan, they did nothing but pray and pray and pray. And I'm telling you, I heard them prayers. They've helped me with some fundraising, because you don't plan on getting sick. I was very angry after my transplant because I lost everything. I've lost 3 vehicles. I've lost my job. Not that I had a job, I was volunteering. My wife had a job, but she lost hers. We used to work at an antique store, and I stayed there and helped. But we lost that job. We lost everything but my house. My parents owned this house, and through donations, through charitable groups, we were able to keep the lights on, the heat on, so that my daughter could stay living here. And I was very bitter. Very bitter. But one day, my pastor had a sermon. And I don't know exactly which one, I'm still suffering a little bit from brain fog. But it was, don't worry about the past. Don't worry about what you lost. Think of what you have, and think of the future of what you're going to have. That changed my life. Since that day, I was no longer miserable. I was no longer bitter. I was very thankful. So that's my story. I've left out a lot. I know I left out a lot. But that's basically it in a nutshell. Feel free to ask questions if you'd like. I'll be honest. I don't think I want to share pictures of what I went through, but as you can imagine, they're very sick. My transplant was very, very gruesome. But I thank God for the second chance. Once again, just rambling. When I was sick, I wanted to help my church. Going back to church, and I thought maybe I could make the toxins in my brain. I wanted to make salsa and put them in my booth that I have at the antique store, and all proceeds would go to my church to help them and thank them for all their prayers and what they've done to help me. The health department shut that down real quick. I did make one heck of a good batch, though. I'm told it was really good. So I kept praying. I said, Jesus, there's got to be something that I can do to help this congregation who through their prayers and donations has helped me. And that's when he said, do what I've always done before I got sick. I was always a scrapper. That's what I could do. So now when I take my scrap in, 50% of everything I collect now goes to my church. Sometimes it can be good. Sometimes, if I don't take it in, like I haven't took no scrap in a while, I can't afford to give much. I give like $5 if I can. But I'll always be thankful to them. Anyways, if you lasted this long, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.